Have you ever watched a mom or a dad interact with a baby and they make this really high-pitched talking and they're cooing at the baby and wondered, that person looks like a psychopath? There's actually evidence that shows us that this high-pitched style of talking to babies actually helps to promote social attention and social interaction and communication. We are talking all about baby talk, or what they now call parentese. That's the nicer way of saying it. And how we can use baby talk to start looking for some of the early signs of a future diagnosis of autism. My name is Carrie Sousa Woodward. I'm a board-certified behavior analyst, and I've been working with autistic kids and adults for over 20 years now. There have been a number of studies that look at babies' eye gaze patterns, or where babies' eyes are pointing or looking, and how it relates to autism. What we know is that babies who do go on to receive a diagnosis of autism look a lot less at people's faces or at people in general. They're more drawn to non-social things like objects or items. And though there's no real understanding of why autistic babies look less at people and faces, it's very clear that this exists from a very young age, and that kids who do not spend enough time looking at people or faces miss out on so much learning that's happening there. There was recently a study that was released that looked at eye gazes of babies as it pertains to baby talk. So baby talk is this very stylized way of speaking to babies that you often hear parents doing. And it's using normal language, it's using regular words. So traditionally the word baby talk was associated with sort of made up words that sounded babyish. So for example, instead of saying the word bottle, you would say baba. But baby talk really means using regular language, but just doing it in a very stylized way. It often has very high-pitched intonation. It's a little bit slower. It has some exaggeration in the way that it's delivered. So in this most recent study, babies were exposed to two different screens. And on one screen, they had a person's face talking in this very high-pitched baby talk way. And on the other screen, they had non-social things like traffic sounds or even techno music with moving shapes on it. And the baby's eye gaze controlled what played more. So if they looked at one screen, that screen would play. And then at the end of the study, the researchers basically tallied up how much time each baby spent looking at the different screens. And essentially, babies that went on to receive a diagnosis of autism spent significantly less time looking at the person's face that was speaking in this stylized, high-pitched tone of voice. So there are a few things that I got out of this research article. And one is that it's a natural way to sort of draw attention of babies. Babies are learning by looking at people. They're learning by looking at people's faces. When parents speak in this stylized way, it does tend to draw the attention of the baby over to our face. When our babies look at us and smile or coo, it's inherently reinforcing to us as parents. And so a lot of our parent behavior becomes shaped by seeing how our child is responding. That parentese, that motherese, that baby talk actually gets reinforced on our part because our babies are more naturally drawn to look at our faces. However, if our baby is autistic, they're not being drawn over to that high-pitched sound that parents often make. So most likely, parents of kids who are autistic might use baby talk less often because it's not reinforced by having the baby look over and look at our face when that happens. But then the second thing that happens is that even if parents are engaging in high rates of baby talk, the autistic babies are not being drawn to look at the parent's face, and so they're going to naturally miss out on all of this learning that's happening when they're looking at their parent's face, whether that's language production, whether that's just facial expressions, social connection, all of these things that happen when babies and parents are face-to-face and looking at each other. The other part that I took away from this research is that we still are in a place where kids are typically not getting their diagnosis until age 2, 3, 4, maybe a lot older. We have a lot of adults that are actually now getting their diagnosis as their own children are referred for assessment. But what we do know is that kids who can get early intervention very young end up having better outcomes in the long term. This just means that at a very young age, they're able to start working on some of this social connection, the communication piece, so that they have these foundational skills as they age in their development. So there's no formal diagnosis that's typically given prior to the 18-month mark. But that doesn't mean that the babies are not already autistic. Most likely, babies are born autistic based on some genetic differences. It's that we can't formally assess or diagnose until about 18 months. However, this research is incredibly promising that there might eventually be some sort of screening tool that could be used to study the eye gaze pattern of a baby to see whether or not that baby might go on to receive a diagnosis of autism, because early intervention strategies could be put in place so early for those babies. Though there's not a lot of early intervention exercises that we can do with an 8-month-old baby, there is a lot that parents can be doing to start stimulating social connection and communication, even if there's a risk that a child might go on to receive a diagnosis of autism. I have seen a lot on social media of parents in autism support groups that are essentially saying how worried they are about their baby's development. And so much of the responses are, don't worry, they're just babies. You have so much more time before they can actually get a diagnosis. But that's limiting because there is a lot that we can do as parents to start working on some of the fundamental core pieces in order to set our kids up for long-term success. So as a parent, if you have a child that isn't being drawn to your face when you're engaging in baby talk, if you have a baby who's not looking at your face very often, if they're not averting their gaze to look at you when you start engaging in this high-pitched tone of voice, there may be a reason to start worrying about that. It doesn't necessarily mean that your child will go on to receive a diagnosis of autism. However, it's something that you should be watching. And this is actually the fundamental piece of the course that we've created at Autism Jumpstart. The Jumpstart the Journey course is all designed to give parents very easy tools to engage with their child in a way that is a bit different than they would typically engage with their child. And there's small tweaks to everyday normal interactions that will help establish some incredible value in social interaction, in people, and in faces, so that kids are naturally more drawn to look at people, which is where so much learning is happening. We're still years away from pediatricians really taking seriously the concerns of parents of 6 and 8 and 10-month-old babies who may not be looking at them often enough. For now, these eye gaze screening tools are typically only research-based. So if there are any research studies in your area that are looking at eye gaze patterns in an attempt to look for autism, feel free to sign up with your baby if you're having concerns. If your baby is a younger sibling of a child who already has a diagnosis of autism, their chances of having a diagnosis as well are much higher than if they don't have a sibling already diagnosed with autism. But that doesn't mean that we still shouldn't be on high alert, making sure that babies are often looking at our faces and pulled to look at our face when they hear that high-pitched voice. And even if your pediatrician won't take your concerns seriously, you can start doing this incredible work with your child. And there's no harm in any of the work that you can do, even if your child does not go on to receive a diagnosis of autism. All it is stimulating social connection and communication so that we're laying the foundation for developing comprehensive language and for this natural desire for babies to look more often at people's faces. Kids learn through imitation. So if kids aren't watching people, they're not going to be able to engage in this natural imitation, which is how most kids are picking up on how to learn really critical skills. We want kids to be watching people. We want them to be looking around and noticing other people. And this starts very, very young with just that simple avert of gaze when a person enters a room, when the high-pitched voice starts to happening. And you can notice this at a very young age. If your baby is not being drawn to listen to that baby talk and not being drawn to look at your face when you're engaging in baby talk. So it's definitely something to think about. It's something to watch and monitor. It's something to start writing down and tracking and continue to stay on top of it. What I can recommend is that even if your pediatrician is not taking any of your concerns seriously and continues to tell you that we'll wait till your child is 18 months before doing any sort of formal assessment, push to get the referral in your hand before your child is 18 months. Getting an assessment conducted can take months to years based on where you live. So you don't want to wait until 18 months to even get the referral to get on the wait list for your assessment, which will then be 6 months or 8 months down the line. Once you have an assessment, then the assessment takes months. Then you get a diagnosis. Then you need to start treatment, and wait lists for treatment can take months. So sometimes it can take years to get kids the right type of treatment that they need in order to be the most successful that they can be. So start the process early. Start getting on wait lists before you even get that formal referral, so that once you get that referral, you're ready to go and can begin the assessment process. And again, there's so much that you can do as a parent to start working on some of the things that are going to be critical for your child's success down the line in the future. Like, subscribe, share with a friend if you think this is going to be helpful, and leave a comment if you've noticed anything about your baby's eye gaze or how they look at people, and whether or not that baby talk style of speech has come naturally to you or if it's something that you've had to work on.